Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today for the Monday Creative Kickoff. We're going to groove our way through a Monday again and, get you started to kick off your creative week, whatever your creative discipline may be. So as always, we're coming to you live across Behance, Adobe Live, X, LinkedIn, and YouTube, as well as Twitch. So thank you so much for joining on all the aforementioned channels. Hope you all had a great weekend. So much going on in the world of video and production. And, we kicked off this series a few weeks ago with, how has AI changed your creativity? And we kind of went into some of the tools in Premiere and After Effects. And, of course, periodically on the stream here, we've talked about, obviously, the incredible innovations that we brought to the communities just about a year ago with Firefly, Gen Fill, and Gen Expand and Photoshop. I mean, I can speak personally that that's kind of completely changed the way that I just, particularly when restoring old photos and doing things and trying to get creative with photos that, didn't get the framing quite right the first time around. And then in the last week and a half or so, Sora hits the scene and, I don't know, kind of changes the whole game for everybody, or at least the perception of the game as it stands today. So I'm really curious in the chats, what are your thoughts on that? Have you seen the stuff coming out of Sora? Have you seen the video? Have you, what's your take on it? Really curious. It's been, obviously there's been, a variety of mixed reactions. Most of them, of course, initially just shock and awe. And I'm sure by now, many of you, if not all of you, have seen the comparisons to just a year ago with the infamous, Will Smith eating spaghetti clip, which is on an Adult Swim level horrifying. And then you look at today, what they're doing, and there was this clip going around is it a week ago or 2 weeks ago? I've just lost track of time. It's like a woman filming on either an overground train or I don't know exactly what it is, which is in and of itself no big deal. She's shooting out of a window, but then she goes into like a tunnel or something. You see her reflection in the window filming out, and that's just one of those wow kind of crazy moments. So very curious what you all think about that. If you have thoughts about that, if you don't, okay. So we're gonna say a couple shouts here. Let's see, we've got a bunch of people joining. Let's go into our various chats. Bear with me here for a second as I get back into this all. So I see we've got Bradley Smith and CJ, Megagarg, Cody Bear, Z by HP, Barbara, Tim. How's it going, everybody? Thanks so much for joining on a Monday. Nice to see you all. Okay, so, no one's commenting about Sora. Lorianne, hello. How are you doing? Nice to see you on YouTube. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, as we continue to evaluate different types of, AI-assisted workflows and then different generative workflows, and, seemingly every day something new is creeping up and popping out, and there's always kinds of crazy reactions initially. But it's always interesting to take a kind of step back and then see days later what the reactions are. And it's it's great, but is it everything? And there's still a lot of fear and trepidation about jobs in the industry, and then you look at some things, you're like, well, still need the guidance of a human hand in many cases at some point in time. I see Beth is like, I haven't checked it out yet. Oh, Megagarg is saying it's great, but the human touch is missing. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, in some cases, maybe not always. I know I saw a clip yesterday, and it was like a Formula One racer or something to that. Apologies if I offended anybody who's a racing fan. But yeah, it was kind of one of those sort of crazy, amazing looking pieces of video, and you're like, wow, this is, how would I otherwise shoot this if I didn't have a press pass to, the Grand Prix. Hovannes from Armenia, nice to see you. Okay, I'm waiting for Adobe to do it responsibly. Yes, it's all about that. And that's been our mission from the beginning, right? And that's why we're part of the Content Authenticity Initiative. I know we just had one of our executives talking to the Television Academy about those very things, about, just being responsible, where the content is sourced from, and how we use metadata and tagging and other things to, assure ownership and who's, where it was created and how it was created and with what model or engine or whatever. So, yeah, lots of things. Z by HP saying, I haven't played with Sora yet. AI was a big topic last week at the HPA Tech Retreat. Oh, I bet. I mean, it was, it was just everywhere. Katarina Jovanovic, hello, nice to see you. Audio slightly behind the video feed. Can't do much about it. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of audio editing. We'll get out of Sora talk. Victor Parr, the creative tools, tech, and tactics continue to make us all adapt and learn. Yeah, I mean, totally agree. Sora is an indicator of what is next. We will continue to see multiple tools enter the marketplace. Get ready, so many new things coming. I mean, yeah, that's it, right? It just keeps coming. So, as creative artists, it's kind of it behooves us to be inquisitive. And as I like to point out, I was talking with my own offspring this weekend because they're obviously a bit younger and they're in the scene. And they were saying, well, what does that mean for, like cartoons and filmmaking and all that kind of, we just kind of got on this very deep filmmaking discussions at Beetlejuice's house over the weekend. And I said, hey, well, listen, you like my younger son's been experimenting with time lapse. Nope. Stop motion. You like to experiment with stop motion? You like to do the thing that you're doing? Keep doing the thing that you're doing. Nothing has to change for you, It may, if you want it to, but it doesn't have to. And certainly where we are today in that video space, that's kind of the case. So I'm all open eyes and ears to it. I think it's very interesting to see where it's going to go. But obviously, as Tim mentioned, the content authenticity and safety and knowing where your stuff is coming from and how it was generated and what was used in the models, that's huge. And that's really, I think, where we as Adobe have done a really good job communicating that's really just our whole mission with generative technologies in general. Good wording, Monday morning man. Okay. Oh, glad to hear. Cody's got synced audio. Okay. So we're going to take a look at cutting up some drum loops and processing them. Why? Because, and oddly enough, as I've been watching a couple of, not just Sora, but just various AI creations over the weekend, many of which are using AI-generated music. And, as I've said ad infinitum, if that's your thing and you see a great benefit to that versus stock, if you're not a composer or whatever, yeah, it's wonderful. I will say, of all of the ones that I've heard, I should say, having heard multiples now of this sort of generated music, stylistically, well, I've heard sort of similar styles out of all of them, which is sort of a beat-based. I wouldn't say pop. It's sort of a dance style. I don't know what the categories are anymore. Modern, shake your bum music. I don't know. And it's all kind of the same. It's good. It's not bad. It's not changing the world, but it's like, yeah, if I want that sort of pulse, sure. I've heard some, trippy, slow, moody stuff. Sort of generic, but good. It'll get better. I mean, it's still kind of the beginning of that too. That's only, I think I first heard of Stable Refusion like a year ago, give or take. So they're probably about 6 months to a year behind, where like Firefly, Midjourney, all that stuff is. It's interesting, right? It's interesting, and I think it's more interesting for me personally, in the realm of sound design, sound effects, all those sorts of things. Music. On the generative side, I'm a little less personally interested, but on the sound effects side, generating, how do I get a particular kind of whoosh or a explosion or a particular kind of, clanking of a metal pan sort of sound. That's interesting to me because those things are just harder to capture in general, Make the sound of a lightsaber. Well, we know where they'd sort that though. Okay, so let's go ahead and check it out. Modern shake your bum music. Thank you, Cody. We're going to clip that now. That'll be my social post for the week. says the composer. Okay, so this is a session recorded. This is just drums. Since I began kind of just doing tests with the very kit that I played on a few weeks ago. By the way, I was going to play for you today, but they're doing some massive construction outside, and despite having soundproofing even in the walls, there was just some stuff bleeding into the mics. I wasn't loving it, so more just stuff we could have filtered out, but I didn't want to bother. It was kind of throwing me off, so we're not doing that. We're just going to take a look at some of these. So I'm just going to play some of this through, and the idea here is I'm going to show you just a couple of things. If you're wanting to create, and this was my point of mentioning the generated music, most of it's just being used as underscore. It's just stuff in the background. You're not really meant to pay attention to it. And you could do that with really just simple drum grooves, drum patterns. And, with just a couple of simple mixing techniques, you can make a drum groove just sound really cool. Now, we don't have a looping engine in Audition that allows you to change tempo and things easily, but you can still make loops and then loop them for multiple bars or, whatever duration. You could also use things like Remix to adjust duration, but probably wouldn't have to do that with just a drum groove. Anyway, let's take a listen to this particular one and see what this sounds like here. It's kind of a loose snare. That's just kind of a nice simple beat. All right, so let's zoom in on here. Now, one of the nice things about, and I say this all the time, about the Audition UI is that it's really accurate. So if you ever struggle with having like clips, oh, there's a little UI bug. If you ever struggle with having sort of clipped beginnings and endings, you can see here, right where the next attack of the kick drum lives, and I'm just selected right before that. You can see there's this into the snare, right? Again, here, this is just bleed from the tom mics. But what that means is, as you saw just very quickly visually, if I play this back, we should have now a very seamless sounding loop. And Ziba, do I have towels on the drums? Yes, because this is my Ringo Abbey Road kit, as mentioned. So yes, they are toweled. Now this is before I tightened up and toweled the snare. So this is from a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I'll let you hear the full towel in a second. So brilliant. And identically tuned and mic'd, including some of the same vintage mics. I've already gone through this rant. I get too excited by it. Now, I have a little, I think it's like a little too, I'm really playing like right at the edge of the beat. So I'm gonna back this off. What is this UI bug that I'm seeing? What is this? That's really strange. I'm really pulling it behind the beat there. Okay, that's fine. I can dig it. So here's what we're gonna do. What I'll typically do with something like this is I want to add a little bit of maybe ambience to something like a snare or some other part of the kit. So as I've done many times here, I created a stereo bus that says drum room, not drum roo. Here, I'll just remove the space because that's gonna drive me crazy. Oh, you still can't see it. What? Really? I could see floor tom, but I can't see drum room? Okay, sure, whatever. That's on its own bus. By the way, you can create those buses simply by going to the associated channel strip under the sends and create a bus there. You can also do it via the multi-track menu, add stereo bus. So as always, lots of ways to do the same thing. And then on said bus, I have placed a stereo reverb So if I want to enable a little bit of that for a snare, I just come over here, turn on send 1, and then go ahead and add drum room, not to be confused with drumroo, and add it directly to the snare. And then we have the controls that we've talked about many times, which is pre-fader, post-fader. If you do post-fader, this will allow the reverb to follow the fader of the snare. So if I add reverb, so here we can do post-fader first, and it's pretty subtle because I'm not really hitting the snare a lot here, but let's take a quick listen. I'll just crank this up a bit and see what we've got. That's nice. Okay, so with it post-fader, if I drag the fader down, the snare and the reverb go away. Now you're still hearing bleed from the room mics, but again, that's just bleed from the overheads. If I do pre-fader, which means that I'm the signal of the snare to the reverb before the fader here, if I drop the snare fader, the reverb of the snare will still be there. This is actually a nice way too to test kind of if the verb that you're using, and this is kind of a medium drum room, semi-reflective, if it matches kind of the tonality of the kit in general. So, you can play around with that, and if you're using like a plate reverb or an ambient type hall or something like a chamber, it doesn't always kind of work. So when you add reverb to say a snare and we're gonna put some on the toms in a minute, it kind of just lets you hear, I need something smoother with a smoother decay, or maybe it's too almost gated sounding. There's too much early reflection. It's just a good way to test things out. This is getting super nerdy here, but if you're trying to mix kind of the ultimate drum groove, that's one way to do it. And then of course you also have under your sends, not only the level that you're sending to the reverb, so how much of that signal is going over there, but then you can pan that as well. So our snare is pretty much center. Again, because it's all mic'd stereo, it's actually slightly left of center. And you can even see I have that here too. I've even panned it that way. I like to reproduce drums as if I'm sitting at the kit. That's how I mix them, exactly as they are kind of in my space. So I do the same thing here. So we could technically have the reverb offset, so we could have it echoing somewhere else. Now it's on the right side. That's a kind of late 60s, 70s technique. Or you can just have it kind of, again, reverberating in stereo, in which case it sort of follows, well, depending upon pre-fader or post-fader, it can follow where the positioning is in your mix. So as it's pre-fader here, in this case, if we want it to just remain in the center, we leave it centered. If we want it to kind of reflect that slightly off-center, we'd want to do that here. We're talking like 3 degrees. It doesn't really matter. But just to inform you, that's where all of that is, okay? So once we've done that, and see Barbara's saying 7 different sounds. Yes, technically you could. You could add different sounds to each one of those. Different reverbs to each drum if you so desired. And we're going to do that in just a second. Fat snare. Yeah, it's pretty fat. It's just, it was very loose. I had to do a bunch of work. I wound up having to replace one of the snares on there. It was kind of a drag. And then did some other taping to get it, you'll see, tighter in a moment. So I like this. It's got a nice body to it. So with this selected like this inside of the multitrack, I can simply go export multitrack mixdown time selection. And that's the key to, creating one of these little looped bits, is I'm going to create just a timed selection. We'll call this Drum Groove 01, because surely I've never named anything that before. Stick it on the desktop, Wave PCM 48K 32-bit. Okay. And go ahead and export that. All right. And I've got a marker in here just to remind me here. So there we go, King CT. So I'm gonna mix this one down as well. So now I still have that snare reverb applied. But this time, this is that groove that I recorded live on stream a couple weeks ago. Listen to this Z, because this is full toweled Titan snare, and it's fat AF, fat with a PH. For why even bother trying to be hip? Okay, here we go. Okay, so those boom, 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 boom. Now again, that's a really fat toweled floor tom, and I don't have anything gated here. Sorry, I don't have any gates applied to any of the mics. Everything is open. Do I typically do that? Depends. Because they're toweled, there's less ring. There's still a bit of bleed, but you know, again, from an audio perspective, if we're just looking at, you know, the level of the attack versus what's bleeding through, it's minimal, right? It's legit. It also just, again, with proper miking, and this is why I always have my phase meter up as well to ensure that I'm wonderfully in phase. I don't know why that's not, why are we not seeing that now? I'm not seeing frequency analysis either. For heaven's sake, what's happening in this build? What is happening? That is fat. So you can see it's really wonderfully in phase. It's very, very delayed though. By the way, I want to point out, you know, as you scrub through, for those who are new to doing this work, if you ever want to see where some of the fundamentals of your instruments are, for instance, sort of the fat, you talk about fat snare, okay? That's a musical term here. If you look at your frequency analysis, you can see it really lives, you know, right around 178, 180 something. Oh yeah, 188 there. That's really where that is, right? So that's kind of the fundamental fatness. And that's why you got to watch the octave above that, let's say 340, 360, because it can take up too much space. So you'll often not touch 200, 150 on a snare, because that's kind of where that fat is, particularly when it's toweled. But 360, 380, you might dip a little because you want to carve out that space, you know? So you got to watch kind of the octaves of where these things live. Thank you, Cody. And similarly, now I'm using a vintage AKG D12E microphone on the kick. And that, unlike kind of more modern kicks, its fundamental is right about 100 hertz, okay? So we're kind of used to today that 60 hertz kick drum. That's kind of that's sort of the emulation of the TR-808 is like, you know, a clipped 60 hertz generated tone, effectively. Maybe it's a little bit lower, but 60, 63 is usually the standard. Older mics, older vintage mics, it technically picks up below that, but really the sort of fundamental of where that mic shines is right around 100. So if you're trying to go for a very modern, clicky kick sound, you're not going to use that microphone, all right? But let's go back to this one here. Oh, look at that. And the frequency analysis came back, and so did phase. All right, now let's add another bus, because we're going to put some on the floor tom. I see we've got like 2 minutes here. My God. The half hour just goes, friends. And let's do Floorverb. For Floorverb. And we're going to go back to our, let's go native on this one. Go studio reverb. And let's go to something like, let's use our Great Hall. It's going to be very dark, but that's okay. And we're going to do pre-fader with this as well. No dry, all wet. Let's drop this down. And I'm just going to highlight this section down here where I'm hitting the floor toms. is that on there? Remove that. Okay. That sounds pretty good. Maybe we'll actually place that too over there. All right. Let's take a quick listen here. Oh, and we're almost out of time. And that's all the time we have, friends. Making some grooves, mixing them down. So much more to say, so much more to do. I almost just quoted, anyway. Smash Mouth. Okay, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Enjoy the rest of your creative Monday, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.